Peru's President Pedro Castillo appointed a new cabinet, the fourth since he came to power 6 months ago, including replacing a prime minister who lasted just 3 days in office. Bolivia's Defense Deputy Minister Juan Calvimontes reported that more than 20,000 were affected by recent rains nationwide, warning that flooding could continue in the upcoming days. Iran reiterated its willingness to reach an agreement to rescue the nuclear deal signed with Western powers in 2015 and stressed the urgency for Western countries to lift their sanctions. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, GLADYS, and these are the news. Peru's President Pedro Castillo appointed a new cabinet, the fourth since he came to power 6 months ago, including replacing a prime minister who lasted just 3 days in office. Castillo's 6 months in office have been characterized by setbacks and internal struggles within the government, as well as attacks from the radical right, which launched a failed attempt to impeach him. A week ago, the head of the state appointed this third cabinet after the surprise resignation of Prime Minister Mirto Vázquez due to disagreements over promotions in the police force. In his place, the president appointed lawyer and parliamentarian Héctor Valer Pinto, who was left in the hot seat after the media reported that his wife and daughter had denounced him in 2016 for alleged domestic violence. Since 2017, Peru has experienced instability after political leaders began pushing vacancy motions in Congress to abruptly get rid of presidents. In Argentina, thousands of people marched on Tuesday to Plaza de Mayo in rejection of the agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Activists, left-wing political parties and social organizations rallied in front of the government headquarters in Buenos Aires to demand the breaking off of negotiations with the international organization. Under the slogan, "Not to the agreement with the IMF, swindles are not to be paid," they demanded a reversal of the pact recently reached by the government of Alberto Fernandez. The agreement refinances the loan of $44 billion granted to the country in 2018 under the administration of former President Mauricio Macri.
Different reports and investigations show that it's an illegal and illegitimate debt that violated the IMF's very own statutes, and that those funds were used to pay speculators and to finance capital flight from large companies.
The President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, ends his international tour in Barbados with a meeting with the Prime Minister of that country, Mia Mottley. On Tuesday, after visiting the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China and holding meetings with his peers, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, the Argentinian president made a last stop in his tour to meet with recently elected Mia Mottley and representatives of the countries of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. During the talks, topics like climate change and the sovereignty claim over the Malvinas Islands were discussed. Fernandez's meetings with those leaders are aimed at deepening relations with the Caribbean countries that are members of CELAC. The president of Argentina returned to his country on Tuesday night to resume the domestic agenda with the agreement with the IMF as the national government's top priority. And Bolivia will allocate 6% of bank profits to social function in order to strengthen funds for housing, production and seed capital. The percentage will be aimed at eliminating poverty and all types of economic and social exclusion, according to Bolivia's Economy Minister Marcelo Montenegro. The provision comes in the framework of the 2013 Financial Services Law, which establishes that when financial entities have profits, they must contribute a certain percentage to social spending. In 2021, Bolivian banks recorded $225 million in net profits, an amount that represents an increase of 60% compared to 2020, when profits were around $140 million, the minister said. The Executive Secretary of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Agreement, ALBA TCP, Sasha Laurenti, and the Chinese ambassador to Venezuela, Li Baoran, held a meeting on Tuesday. Both officials advocated the need to defend multilateralism and international relations. Llorenti took to Twitter to make known several details of the meeting, as he stressed the importance of also defending the principles and purposes of the Charter of the United Nations as an international treaty that serves an instrument of international law that is binding for the member states of the United Nations organizations. Brazil's Chamber of Deputies will vote on Wednesday on an urgent bill known as the Poison Package. The initiative will allow the entry of toxic agrochemicals into the country on a massive scale. It is a combination of several proposals put forward by a special commission, mostly composed of parliamentarians accused of receiving funding from agricultural-related businesses. The bill will allow products with a higher carcinogenic potential or that cause health problems to be put into circulation more quickly and without thorough evaluation by health authorities. During the government of Jair Bolsonaro, the release of pesticides for commercial use in Brazil set a record for the presence of pesticides since 2016. The year in which it was banned by the then President Dilma Rousseff. On Tuesday, Honduras Foreign Affairs Minister Eduardo Reina and the Human Rights Minister Natalie Roque announced that the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights agreed to investigate the Honduran state for its involvement in the coup d'etat against President Manuel Zelaya in 2009. As the complaints bearer, former President Zelaya must provide evidence to support these facts and the participation of the judiciary and the National Congress in his capture, illegal removal, and expulsion of the country. Once the human rights body finishes the investigation, it will attempt to reconcile a settlement between Zelaya and the state. If both sides do not manage to negotiate, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights will initiate a trial. This policy is part of the President Xiomara Castro's strategy to recover the rule of law and guarantee that the human rights of Hondurans never again be violated. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Bolivia's Defense Deputy Minister Juan Calvimontes reported that more than 20,000 were affected by recent rains nationwide, warning that flooding could continue in the upcoming days. Damages were recorded in 48 municipalities where over 7,000 hectares and crops of around 900 houses were affected. The northern region of La Paz was one of the most badly hit areas due to rivers overflowing, landslides and blockages in urban areas. Calvimontes stated that hundreds of families were relocated in shelters in attendance for reconstruction works in their homes. The Defense Deputy Minister also announced the allocation of a $9 million budget, which will be distributed among the Defense Ministry, the Rural Development Ministry, and the Environment Ministry to conduct the recovery operations. In Colombia, earlier this Tuesday, the death toll rose to 16 after a landslide in the municipality of Pereira in the department of Risaralda. On Tuesday night, authorities were still searching for missing persons. Members of the local community told local media that more people were trapped under the rubble. According to the Risk Management Unit, 35 people were injured and 52 houses were affected. The landslide was a consequence of the constant rain in the region and the consequent rise of the Aurun River, causing the biggest tragedy of this kind since 1977.
Disaster was felt there, and I jumped to look for my father and my stepmother and my siblings. I only managed to take out my brother and sister and a nephew. My stepmother and a little niece who were under a fridge, I found them, but they were already dead. It was a very loud bang at 6:30 in the morning, and it swept away all the houses in front of it, about 6 houses, including the people inside.
And the massive fire ripped through the building under construction in Oklahoma City in the Midwest on Tuesday night. The city's fire service reported that more than 80 firefighters were on the scene to fight the blaze from the ground and with the support of telescopic ladders. The fire lasted more than 4 hours and affected a 5-story hotel and apartment complex under construction. The authorities reported no injured people. The causes of the incident are not known at this time. In the United States, protesters across Minneapolis continue to demand justice for Amir Locke, who was shot and killed by a Minneapolis police officer last week during a pre-dawn raid. Demonstrators took to the streets and arrived at City Hall demanding accountability for those involved. Minneapolis police last week shot and killed Locke, a 22-year-old black man, while executing a search warrant in connection to a homicide investigation that Locke was not involved in. A suspect in that investigation was arrested on Monday. The teen has been identified as Locke's cousin. The youth was booked at the Ramsey County Juvenile Detention Center on second-degree murder in relation to the killing of Otis Elder. The killing has caused outrage nationwide, and especially in Minneapolis, where the police murder of George Floyd less than 2 years ago exposed deep distrust between the community and the law enforcement.
Black youth are being murdered across the nation. Our message, time and time again, black youth are being murdered across the nation. Our message today is that we need to protect young black lives. We are humans, we deserve to live, and we have hopes and dreams. Our demands consist of banning all no-knock warrants, full transparency and a full overhaul and demilitarization of Minneapolis Police Department, full review of MPD and SWAT practices, resignation of Police Chief Interim, Huffman and Mayor Fry, accountability of Judge Peter Cahill, the same judge for the Chauvin trial that led to the no-knock warrant, termination of Mark Hanneman, the police officer who murdered Amir Locke in a matter of 9 seconds.
In Australia, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken attends the meeting of the so-called Quad Group, aimed at countering China's economic and military growth. Blinken landed in the Australian city of Melbourne on Wednesday, and during his 3-day visit to the country, he will attend a summit of foreign ministers of the so-called Quad Group Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, the meetings in which he will discuss with his counterparts from Japan, India and Australia issues such as maritime security and cooperation. The group is trying to counteract Beijing's influence in the area, and it is increasing economic, diplomatic and military presence. Blinken's visit follows the Australian government's request to its allies to curb Chinese militarization in the South China Sea. This is the first visit to that country by a U.S. Secretary of State since 1985. As the Quad ministerial meetings take place, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Wednesday the United States, by forcing other countries to accept U.S. democratic standards, drawing lines based on democratic values and cobbling together small groups, has completely betrayed democracy.
China is a boon to the regional order. China pursues peace, development and cooperation, and promotes the building of an equal, open and inclusive security system in the Asia-Pacific region that is not targeted at any third country. China opposes the establishment of close and exclusive cliques or groups within groups, or the creation of confrontation between camps. China joins the majority of other countries in recognizing and supporting the international system with the United Nations at its core and the international order based on international law rather than the so-called rules-based order unilaterally defined by one or several countries.
In Poland, the Defense Ministry confirmed it will send ammunition, anti-aircraft missiles and drones to Ukraine amid the narrative of an imminent invasion by Russia. Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak confirmed on Wednesday that Poland will send ammunition, short-range anti-aircraft missiles and drones to Ukraine to contribute to the country's defensive arsenal against the threat from Russia. Błaszczak also said that during his visit to London on Monday, it had been agreed that 350 British troops will be sent to the southeast Poland to join the 1,700 U.S. troops whose deployment is being completed in the next few days. Energy prices in Turkey and other countries have soared in the past year due to recovering demand and geopolitical tensions. But Turks have also seen their overall purchasing power dwindle dramatically amid a currency crisis and two-decade high inflation that reached almost 50% last month. Others face the same problems as electricity bills soared between 52% and 127% in January, depending on consumption. Adding gas, many of them have found themselves with bills that have doubled or tripled. The currency crisis came last year after President Recep Tayyip Erdogan put pressure on the central bank to cut the main interest rate despite rampant inflation. The lira lost 44% of its value against the dollar last year as Turks rushed to buy gold and foreign currency.
We're looking for solutions. We came here to make our voices heard. We need to be heard. We have no choice. That's all we can think about now. We go home, we get under the covers. We don't turn on the lights, we don't use the oven. What kind of life is this? My electricity bills have increased 3 or 4 times. It's having a huge impact on me. I'm retired and with my pension, I can't pay this. All we want is to live with dignity. Why such abnormal increases? Why doesn't the government try to investigate these increases in the bills?
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Iran reiterated its willingness to reach an agreement to rescue the nuclear deal signed with Western powers in 2015. The Iranian delegation that participated on Tuesday in the round of talks in Vienna showed its willingness to resume the nuclear deal. However, it reiterated that the talks will not make any progress as long as the West doesn't take concrete actions. Tehran's delegation insisted on the need for the unilateral U.S. sanctions imposed on the country to be lifted in order for the negotiations to reach a good conclusion. In this sense, the Russian representation warned that time is running out. In 2018, the United States, under the administration of former President Donald Trump, unilaterally abandoned the deal with the purpose of imposing coercive measures against Iran. Now we address other topics. Protesters in Canada partially blocked one of the busiest border crossing between the country and the U.S. as demonstrating truckers continue to call for the changes to vaccine mandates and other COVID-19 restrictions. The blockade at the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario, prevented traffic from entering Canada, while some U.S.-bound traffic was still moving. The bridge carries 25% of all trade between Canada and the United States, and Canadian lawmakers expressed increasing worry on Tuesday about the economic effects of the disruptive demonstrations. The daily demonstrations staged by the so-called Freedom Truck Convoy are centered in Ottawa, where demonstrators have used hundreds of parked trucks to paralyze parts of the capital for more than 10 days. Protesters have said they will not leave until all vaccine mandates and COVID-19 restrictions are lifted. And Sweden has scrapped its last remaining COVID-19 restrictions. It means there are no more limits on how many people may gather at events or in restaurants. Vaccine certificates can no longer be required, and reduced operating hours have been cancelled for bars and entities. Yet, the streets of Stockholm were quiet. For most of the coronavirus pandemic, Sweden stood out for its comparatively hands-off response. It never went into lockdown or closed businesses, largely relying instead on individual responsibility to control infections. While coronavirus deaths were high comparing with other Nordic countries, they were lower than many other places in Europe that did implement lockdowns. Announcing the reopening last week, Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson said that the pandemic is not over, but has entered to a totally new phase. And while infection rates have risen, it is not overly burdening hospitals.
Of course, it feels hopeful because it's nice to have the restrictions lifted and to be able to feel like you can live your own life freely. But it's also a little bit scary because when the restrictions are lifted, anything can happen. The virus can still mutate, but since a majority of people probably have already gotten it and a lot of people are being vaccinated, it feels hopeful still.
Yes,
but I think you should still be careful, of course.
And New Zealand anti-vaccine mandate protesters face off with police outside Parliament on Wednesday, as demonstrators camped inside the Wellington Legislature's grounds vowed to stay as long as it takes. The protest, which began on Tuesday as a copycat of Freedom Convoy action by Canadian truckers, turned tense as about 100 police stood guard on the steps of the Parliament. Many of the vehicles that jammed central Wellington streets the previous day had left by Wednesday, but a hard core of several hundred protesters refused to leave. 3 were arrested after trying to breach the police line, but officials said the event remained largely peaceful. New Zealand requires mandatory COVID vaccinations for people working in sectors such as health, law enforcement, education and defense, with those who refuse the job losing their jobs.
For our kids and our family, our grandkids. We see what's going wrong with this country.
I think that inspired a lot of New Zealanders just to get up and take action, because if people sit back and don't say anything, no one's going to hear our voice.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.